Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our fourth and final presentation in our Pride celebration series. Our last presentation today is going to be centered on inclusivity in the LGBTQIA plus community. And we're going to be talking primarily about activism, as well as some resources that we have to give you guys some resourceful things as it pertains to all the things that we talked about in this session, as well as ones prior. Our amazing hosts today are all in the room. We're going to be rotating. I call this the hot seat. So you'll see different faces throughout the presentation. We have Adison here. We have Joe here. We have Isha here. And we also have Miss Geiger, who will be here or virtually. So she got the best of both worlds going on. So thank you once again. And without further ado, I'll pass it over to Isha. Let's go.
So today we're going to be talking about statistics, biphobia, transphobia, and hidden trans figures in the community. First, what do we mean when we say inclusivity? The definition of inclusivity is the practice or policy of providing equal access to opportunities and resources for people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized, such as those having physical or mental disabilities or belonging to another minority group. In LGBTQIA plus activism, this means that while advocating for LGBTQIA plus rights, it's important that we include all people in the community. This also means supporting all LGBTQIA plus activists. Sometimes this doesn't always happen. Why is inclusivity within the LGBTQIA plus activism important? The mission of the LGBTQIA plus movement is to establish pride and provide a safe space. When we exclude certain members from this community, it takes away from this mission. Excluding certain sections or certain people from the community spreads the idea that a certain gender or sexuality is better than another. When certain groups within the LGBTQIA plus community are excluded, they become even more vulnerable to discriminatory laws. So in the chat, if you guys could answer some of these questions. So some statistics about the LGBTQI plus community is that 4.5 of adult Americans are LGBT. This is about 11 million people, but only 13 states required sex ed classes to talk about sexual orientation. 4 of these states only allow negative representation of LGBTQ plus people. 80% out of LGBT plus elected officials are white, 57% are gay, and 59% are male. There's only 1 trans woman in a state legislature. There are 8 more in local positions. This means that 1.6% of all elected officials are transgender. 18.6% of major studio films in 2019 had LGBTQ characters, but 70% of these characters were cisgender white gay men, and none of them were transgender.
Hi, I'm going to be talking about bisexuality and bisexual erasure and biphobia. So it's a statistic about bisexuality. About 50% of people who identify as either gay, lesbian, or bisexual identify as bisexual. This makes the bisexual population the single largest group within the LGBTQIA plus community, and that's a statistic from the Williams Institute. Despite the fact that bisexual people are such a prominent part of the LGBTQIA plus community, they still face judgment and exclusion, which brings us to biphobia and bisexual erasure. So biphobia is prejudice, fear, or hatred directed towards bisexual people. And bisexual erasure or bisexual invisibility is a tendency to ignore, remove, falsify, or re-explain evidence of bisexuality in history, academia, the news media, and other primary sources. In its most extreme form, bisexual erasure can include the belief that bisexuality in and of itself does not exist. So this brings us to biphobia's impact on LGBTQIA plus activism. All too often, bisexual people are excluded or rendered invisible in LGBTQIA plus spaces. Because of this, they are not included in conversations about LGBTQIA plus issues when they really should be. So we're going to be talking about examples of biphobia now. Examples are making jokes or rude comments that undermine the legitimacy of bisexuality. This can be seen when people say things like bisexuality is just a phase, telling bisexual people to pick one, saying bisexual people are greedy or selfish for liking more than one gender, calling bisexual individuals allies instead of recognizing them as part of the LGBTQIA plus community. And then some also question another person's bisexuality based on the gender of their partner at the given time instead of how they actually identify. So the impact of biphobia, due to the prominence of biphobia and bisexual erasure in our society, and even in the LGBTQIA plus community in and of itself, bisexual people suffer significantly higher rates of depression and anxiety, domestic violence, sexual assault, and poverty than lesbians, gay men, or straight cisgender people. So this is just a chart demonstrating the lifetime mental health disorder diagnosis for bisexual non-binary people, bisexual women, lesbian women, heterosexual women, bisexual men, gay men, and heterosexual men. And you can see that bisexual non-binary people are the most at risk for mental health disorder diagnosis. So in the chat, answer the questions if you'd like. Can you think of more examples of biphobia and other things that you've seen like in the hallways or have heard people say? Do you think that bisexual erasure is talked about enough?
So some statistics about transgender people. So there's an estimated 700,000 people in the United States who identify as transgender. According to a 2011 study from the Williams Institute, the transgender population represents about 0.3% of American adults. And in recent years, transgender identities have slowly started to become more accepted and celebrated, but the reality of being transgender is a lot more dangerous than a lot of people may think. So what is transphobia? So transphobia is the fear, hatred, disbelief, or mistrust of people who are transgender, thought to be transgender, or whose gender expression does not conform to traditional gender roles. Transphobia can prevent transgender and gender non-conforming people from living full lives free of harm. So what is outing? So a lot of people think that outing is just exposing someone's sexual orientation without their permission. And while that is a form of outing, it can also be used against transgender people. So by sharing information about someone's gender identity against their wishes, you risk them feeling embarrassed, upset, and vulnerable. And you may also put them at risk for discrimination and violence. And transphobia's impact on LGBTQIA activism. Most times, white gay men and white lesbian women are at the forefront of LGBTQIA plus movements. They often leave out trans individuals. This means that it's difficult for transgender people to have a voice even in our own communities. So in the chat, if you would like to answer some of the questions. So if you've been to a pride parade or an LGBTQIA plus protest, was there enough trans representation in your opinion? And do you think that people talk about trans outing enough? Okay.
All right, we can move on.
Yes. So transphobia and its impact. Some examples of transphobia include the aversion to and prejudice against transgender people, which includes refusing to acknowledge or believe one's preferred pronouns, name, or gender identity, derogatory language and name calling, violence, abuse, bullying, etc. And the impact of transphobia. So because of the stigma and misinformation about transgender people who are transgender, even just thought to be transgender, may be denied jobs, housing, or healthcare just because they're trans. And the stress of transphobia on trans people can be very harmful and can cause depression, fear, isolation, feelings of hopelessness, and suicide. And so this is a chart that shows the comparison of self-harm thoughts, self-harm suicide thoughts, and suicide attempts among cisgender males, cisgender females, binary transgender people, and non-binary transgender people. And then, so this is a chart that shows in the US how many states have anti-trans bills. And so the darker of a red it is the more anti-trans bills that there are. Okay, so why transphobia has no place in the LGBTQ community. So there are only 17 states that have not introduced anti-trans bills, making it so that 66% of the US has anti-trans bills. If transgender people are not included in LGBTQIA plus discussions and protests, it makes it seem like these bills are not important and transphobia is not a problem. why it's ignorant to exclude transgender individuals. Transgender women like Marsha P. Johnson, Miss Major Griffin Gracie, and Sylvia Rivera are a big reason why LGBTQ people have some of the rights that we have today. To continue to exclude transgender people does nothing but make it harder for the group that had made make it harder for the group that helped fight for LGBTQIA plus rights in the first place. Okay, so in the chat, you can, if you could be so kind to answer some questions.
You got a good chat.
What are some other examples of transphobia? And have you ever heard someone being transphobic? What did they do or say? Did you feel like you could call them out?
Okay. Transphobia and its impact. TT Gully was a trans woman that was hanged in Portland, Oregon in 2019. Despite the unusual nature of her death, police ruled it as a suicide. The case was later reopened when her family brought evidence to the police that suggested that TT was murdered. TT's murder is evidence of a larger problem in America and around the world. Many trans women, mostly poor and of color, have been attacked, verbally assaulted, raped, or killed because of their gender. The excuses typically made by those that have done these things to trans women is that they were tricked. The idea that trans women exist to trick straight men is harmful and is the reason why so many trans women are no longer with us today. So this is a chart of America with the different states indicating which states LGBTQ Americans aren't fully protected from discrimination in. So all of the gray states that you see are states with absolutely no LGBT non-discrimination protections. Protection for the LGBTQIA+ community. 27 states in America, or 54% of the country, have no anti-discriminatory laws protecting the LGBTQ+ community. About 173 million people live in these 27 states, and of them, the LGBTQ+ community remains unprotected. Recognizing that the LGBTQ+ community suffers from an increased amount of hate crimes against their communities, it is imperative that laws are made to protect them. According to the FBI, sexual orientation is the third largest category in hate crimes at about 16.7% after race and religion. However, as reporting hate crimes to the FBI is not mandatory, these numbers represent a fraction of the true numbers of these hate crimes. Alfonso David, former president of the Human Rights Campaign and LGBTQ+ civil rights lawyer, states, "This year, we saw a tragic new record of fatal violence against transgender and gender nonconforming people in this country, particularly against Black and Brown transgender women. These alarming statistics represent real trauma for individuals and families across this country who have to bear the brunt of these hate crimes." The hidden icons of the LGBTQ movement. Marsha P. Johnson was a Black transgender activist who played a big role in the Stonewall uprisings and advocated for trans and gay rights. Bayard Rustin was a mentor to MLK and played a big role in organizing the March on Washington, but wasn't allowed to speak at the march because he was gay. Miss Major Griffin Gracie is a transgender activist and executive director of the Transgender Gender Variant Intersex Justice Project, which helps trans prisoners.
And we'll jump into some organizations next. So thank you, Isha. I'll confiscate the hot seat from you. We have Miss Geiger come on really quick and break down some of the organizations, as well as the other resources that we have in the presentation.
Hello all. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate your time and really great job. So these are the highlighted resources. The Trevor Project offering a lot amazing programs and services to our youth that provide really safe and accepting, inclusive environments that we're talking about today. And there's free 800 phone and online through text if anyone ever needs to talk to someone. Also, New Jersey has Second Floor, which isn't on here, which is another great 800 line, which is the 888. I'll put it in the chat, these numbers. But their campaign is "You Matter." Sometimes we're forced to live and be with people who don't get us. Life can be hard when not everyone understands or accepts us as we are. There is help and support. Never give up. And then the Free Fellows program is a sponsorship that supports teens living in homophobic or transphobic households. And this offers teens a free and safe space of belonging in what's called the Lorenzo community. And the club is for ages 13 to 17. And there's then the Coffee and Tea Club, which is for 18 and 24. And then there's the National Help Center, which provides free and confidential support for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender plus people and those with questions about sexual orientation or identity, and gives great facts and local resources. So additionally, and I will send this to Mr. Blackwell, Division of Children Families does a really great job in providing DCF supports for our community. And it's just a long page of great resources in New Jersey, so as well as some federal resources that are free to us. So I will forward that to us. And one of those resources that's on this page is called Kaleidoscope. And Kaleidoscope supports the LGBTQIA+ community, questioning youth, young adults, and families in building relationships, strong social connections, and needed life skills. And we have a representative from Kaleidoscope who's here with us today. So I'd like to introduce Riley, if you can hear me, if you want to pop in and just talk a little bit about Kaleidoscope and the programs you offer.
Yes, thank you so much for the invitation. First of all, my name is Riley Keenan. My pronouns are he and him. I really want to applaud the students for this presentation. The fact that you all are, in school, and this was a better presentation I've seen most adults try and attempt. So I just want to applaud you for sure. I myself identify as a trans man. I am the advocate for Kaleidoscope. I've been involved with Kaleidoscope non-professionally and professionally for over 10 years now. For a long time, Kaleidoscope was just one singular peer-to-peer support group for LGBTQ plus youth, 12 to 17. We've actually expanded to another group, 18 to 24 for young adults. Since last March, we've been up and running virtually, and we have had some in-person meetings. I am going to also put our Facebook link in the chat. And you all were talking about Pride events. We have a calendar of all the Pride events that are going on locally. We don't have yours on there, but I will make sure that we add it. So thank you for letting me know that. So yeah, Kaleidoscope is the virtual platform. We leave it up all the time. We make sure that everybody's safe, so they have to fill out certain forms, make sure they provide us a valid email. We send a one-time link to get people to come in and join us on the Discord. And really we leave it up so that everybody that's on there can start to build that sense of community. We have about 40 12 to 17-year-olds right now, and at least 15 young adults. So our plan is to actually expand to anybody of any age in the LGBTQ plus community. So, and I'm very open about, being trans with anybody that joins, so that they feel like they don't have another adult that they have to explain things to. Because I was like that myself, and I know how tedious and hard it is. So I don't know if you all have any questions or need any more information.
We definitely want to thank you.
Oh, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And listen, if anybody that's here, any of you students, if you need anything, please take down my email address. Okay, I'm definitely here for support and resource for you. I know about like doctors on this side of the bridge that are doing gender affirming healthcare and things like that. So, if you need something, Miss G knows how to get in touch with me, but you can also reach out to me directly. And thank you for being you. I'm so impressed because when I was in high school in 1986, I didn't even know what transgender was until I was 42. So the fact that you all are on top of this is so impressive. And I feel like an OG kind of passing the torch along to the younger generation. So I appreciate you, and please continue to stay true to yourself and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Russo.
Thank you so much. I think that's a great segue for me as we slowly bring this presentation to a close and let that be the exclamation point to this 4-part series that we've had the end of this month, at the end of last month and end of this month. I just really want to echo Riley's thoughts. Thank you to the Student Voices members who have done such a tremendous job with all of these workshops today, all of you guys in the room, as well as the last workshops we've had over the last few weeks. I said this in the first meeting, definitely one of the most solid, dedicated group of students I've ever had the pleasure of working with. So thank you all. Round of applause.